In 3 months, not less than 42.6 billion naira was stolen from Nigerian banks. This is according to the Financial Institutions Training Center. In its reports covering April to June of 2024, the FITC states that banking fraud is on the increase. Arise correspondent Frank Omolape takes a look at this rising trend and the need to enhance security measures within the banking system. The report.
The sharp increase in fraud-related losses has raised significant concerns within the banking sector, prompting calls for enhanced security measures across banking platforms. According to Financial Institutions Training Center, in its second quarter 2024 fraud and forgeries report, Nigerian banks recorded a staggering 42.6 billion naira loss to fraudulent activities in the second quarter of the year. This figure, which covers the period from April to June 2024, surpasses the total amount lost to fraud throughout the entire year of 2023, when banks recorded a 9.4 billion naira loss. According to the report, the second quarter 2024 fraud loss represents an alarming 8,993% increase when compared to the 468.4 million naira loss in the first quarter of the year. The surge in the fraud, according to FITC's report, can be attributed to various types of banking fraud, with miscellaneous and other fraud categories accounting for the bulk of the losses, amounting to over 41.1 billion naira. The report shows that fraudulent withdrawals and computer web fraud were notable contributors to the total loss, with 781.2 million naira and 400.7 million naira respectively. Despite the overall increase in the fraudulent activities, mobile fraud was one area where losses declined by 59%, while bank branch-related fraud increased by over 31,000%, underscoring the need for more robust security measures. The second quarter fraud and forgery report highlight a significant surge in fraudulent activities across banking platforms, underscoring the growing threat to Nigeria's financial system. According to the center, deposit money institutions can utilize AI-driven tools that flag unusual entries or patterns to implement continuous and automated monitoring systems that can detect anomalies or discrepancies in settlement files. As fraud-related losses continue to mount, the Nigerian banking sector faces mounting pressures to strengthen its securities infrastructure. With cyber criminals exploiting a range of platforms and channels, the need for more advanced, proactive fraud prevention strategies has become crucial to safeguard customers and protect financial institutions from further losses. Frank Omalape, Arise News.
Femi Oladehin, who is an economist and chief operating officer at Gentle Capital Partners, joins us now from our Lagos studios to speak on this disturbing issue. Very warm welcome to Newsnight, Femi. I mean, this is quite a disturbing issue in the banking industry. Millions of Nigerians have had cause to challenge, deductions, frivolous deductions from their accounts and the rest. Is this AI in practice or just sheer criminals in the banking industry?
Good evening, and thank you for having me. I think your last statement speaks specifically to the issue that we are discussing today. I don't believe that the adoption of new technologies has created the biggest problems that we have today as it relates to fraud in the industry. The reality is that you've seen increased criminal elements infiltrate the banking sector and use it as a platform for carrying out their illicit activities. And you could ask the question as to whether there's some level of complicitness from the banks themselves. Because if you look at the breakdown of the numbers that was in the news report earlier on, you would realize that a significant chunk of the fraudulent activities we're speaking about was actually carried out by the bank itself or by bankers themselves who sit within the bank. And that speaks specifically to very lax security within the banking industry itself, very lax IT infrastructure, And obviously, the fact that even the vetting of employees is probably a problem that the banks have to deal with. But these are significant numbers. I mean, over 3,000, 4,000% growth in fraudulent activity is something that the industry should be concerned about, and even customers should be concerned about.
Yes, indeed, Femi. And the question is, the FITC's report never talked in the days of yours when you used to have banking inspectors. Where are they today? Has AI consigned, these analog staff to the dustbins and the rest? And, that's why these frauds are escalating. Would you say so? Should they be brought back? Are they still there?
So every bank still has an inspectorate division. And the job of the inspectorate division is obviously to visit branches, ensure that, internal controls are being followed, ensure that the policies of the bank are adhered to both by staff and from external people. The reality here is that what we've seen in the market is a significant growth in the number of transactions in the share size of these banks overnight. So you think about it from this perspective, banks that were literally had probably 1 million customers 10, 15 years ago today have over 10 million customers, and they're having to service these people using the same technology and infrastructure that has been available or prevalent in the market for some time. So whilst bank inspectors are continuing to remain relevant in the market, the big issue here is how do you ensure that even as fraudulent activities increase and the scale and the skill set of these fraudulent actors also improve, is that are the banks catching up, or are they, updating their systems to be able to determine, identify, and prosecute, the people who are carrying out these fraudulent activities? And I think that's where the big question is. Do the systems that the banks have the capacity to be able to identify when fraudulent activities have happened, identify who the perpetrators are, and to be able to ensure that there's sufficient evidence to get them prosecuted? So I would say that the role of inspectors is still there. However, what is key now is how do we ensure that the banks have the right systems to be able to solve this problem? But it is a significant problem.
It is indeed a significant problem, and that's where, stakeholders, like the NFIU, EFCC, the police fraud unit, at Alagmo and in Abuja, at the FCID, and of course ICPC. How can, be of help to checkmate this rising criminality in the banking industry?
You make a good point. However, this is one of the things that I always say. By the time you get to a point where prosecution is happening, a crime has already been committed. And perhaps the real skill that we should be talking about is how to ensure that our systems are fraud-proof to prevent the crime being committed in the first place. And that is where the banks themselves become very complicit. Because what happens is that if you look at the numbers from the FITC, the biggest chunk of the fraudulent activities were actually in inter-branch activities or within the branches of the banks, which means that there is lax internal control within the banks. There is a failure of the banks to actually have systems that are able to identify when fraudulent activities have happened and able to prevent the escalation of such. There's some numbers that have made the news recently of the size of some of these fraudulent activities. And I believe that one of the tools that banks can actually increasingly deploy to solve this problem is actually AI. AI is able to determine patterns or wrong patterns within transactions and able to, escalate those to human beings who are then able to investigate and ensure that fraud is prevented before it occurs. So yes, we can say the EFCC, the FIU, and all the fraud units and all of that, but the reality is that those guys only have powers when a fraud has already been committed, when a crime has already been committed. And our focus should actually be in crime prevention rather than crime prosecution. And that's where the banks need to step up and ensure that they are providing the right sites of protection to their customers to ensure that their monies are not stolen.
I'm very sure Nigerians cannot agree more with you there, that the focus should be on crime prevention than, correction or prosecution, like you said. Thanks so very much. Femi Oladehin is the Chief Economist and Chief Operating Officer of Argento Capital Partners. Thanks for coming on news.